Today I did something that I didn't want to do, but also kind of did. I had an enhanced driver's license renewed, which I had to do in person because it was an enhanced driver's license and not the standard one. In Minnesota, you get three options for getting a state issued ID or a driver's license. You can get the standard one, which proves that you are able to drive and lets you buy age restricted items, and that's it. There's the real ID card, which you have a choice to get here, which you can use that to either, you can do the things that I just mentioned, and you can also board a domestic flight after October 1st, 2021. It costs about the same. You have to provide a few more documents, but if you want to board a domestic flight without having to get a passport, that's the best way to do that. And was Real ID a good idea? Is it a law that we should keep? Really, they're not gonna they're not gonna repeal it. I don't see that happening. So definitely prepare for that. And even if you don't plan on traveling by air, at some point you may not really have a choice on that. So definitely have a real ID, and also you need a real ID if you're going into a federal facility that cards people. And then there's the enhanced ID, which does everything I just mentioned before, and also for land and sea, you can go. You can come back from Canada and the Caribbean and Mexico with ease. Going to those countries, it might be a little more difficult. They might be a bit puzzled at seeing an enhanced ID instead of a passport. But in some of those borders, given that it's a Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative document, they will take it. They will let you come into those countries, as assuming they do not have any kind of travel restriction, which they do right now because of a raging pandemic that's killed almost 100 9/11s worth of people as of this video, because this is America. We use weird obscure units for things. So there's that. I mean, we're really close to 100 9/11s right now, and that's just the confirmed numbers. But anyway, that's that. And the enhanced ID is also a proof of citizenship. You need to be a U.S. citizen to get one. It's not meant to be used like that. It's not like you should be getting any kind of special treatment for having an enhanced ID. Though, if you get into trouble with a police officer in like a rural area, or just some police officer that's having a really bad day, they might notice that and treat you different. That's just the reality of it. That's not really a good reason to get an enhanced ID, but if you are worried about that kind of thing and are a U.S. citizen, I would strongly, it's worth considering getting it just for that. So I renewed my enhanced ID. In Minnesota, though, right now, if you have the standard ID, you can renew that online. They'll let you do that. They will take the photo, presumably with some kind of camera that you yourself own, and they will process it and mail you a new one. I don't know how the punch out works for that. They might consider that kind of moot for a standard ID, because they've been extending the expiration of driver's license and ID cards, and I didn't really have to renew it until February, which I did not find out until like the day before. But then again, in Minnesota, you can add certain markers on it like autism and medical alert if you have that on you. You can put emergency contacts on that now. So if you're in a situation, the police at the very least can scan it and contact these people. And I really hope that EMTs, the and the healthcare system does that as well. And honestly, I also think that you should be allowed to put your health insurance information on your ID card. That's a really good idea. It might prevent costs from an emergency from spiraling too much out of control. That's just a suggestion. So, and you can use, though, any of those to buy age restricted items. So, when it comes to IDs and what they are used for and what they're meant to be used for most people, it's kind of mundane. You have to have an ID card to do a lot of things, but you don't have to have an ID card in the US. The problem, though, because I have worked retail, is I have had situations with customers that nearly turned violent, and they all involved carding people and denying the sale. So, for those of you watching this and thinking you are important enough to bypass company policies that are just an extension of enforcing the law, get over yourself. You're not that important, you're not that special, and in my eyes, even if you were the president, if you have an expired driver's license, no cigarettes or alcohol for you. That's just how I roll with that. And that's how it should be. Unfortunately, the enforcement of carding people for age-restricted items is different from state to state, county to county, city to city, and even store to store within the same company, because you have different people staffed. They are trained the same way, but some will shrug their shoulders and say, oh, you look old enough, or, it's fine, and it really is not. One way to improve this is to have a national ID card, and CGP Grey doesn't say that the US should do this, but he kind of implies that it would be a good idea in a video, the eye thing. But my take on that is we should do that, and we can definitely do that in a way that placates the fears of the ACLU, the advocacy group that is the biggest reason we don't have a more secure identification system. There should be parts of a national ID card law that says you definitely cannot use this for tracking people and what they do. So a lot of the stuff Google does, you can't do that with the national ID card. The government can't either. And also, you can use this free, more secure national ID card, not just to open bank accounts or verify your age, but also to register to vote and vote in any state. This card is really secure, and this will make it impossible to commit any kind of in-person voter fraud. And that should just be the end of the voter ID argument. And while people would raise objections to that part, those objections would be an admission of guilt, and a confession that, these voter ID laws were about disenfranchising people the whole time. Because it was, but so that's the voting part of this. So, and there's that, and getting the real ID is a bit more tedious. Getting the enhanced ID is even more tedious than that. The easiest way to do things like that, and also, verify your ID for jobs and things like that, is to have a passport. which I have that, and I use that to get an enhanced ID. I keep making plans about leaving the country at some point. I don't know why I'm doing that still, but I have a passport, I have a passport card, and I have an enhanced ID. I'll probably use one of those at some point. I have TSA pre-check. I hope I don't say anything on this channel that makes the government revoke that, which they can do at any time to anyone for any reason. I have global entry, which makes customs easier. Like, I don't know why I did these things, but I did. And, all of that said, getting a real ID, if the federal government wants people to do that, it should not be as difficult as it currently is. I believe if you live in most of Minnesota, you have to go to a real ID office. And I think the closest one to Maple Grove is the Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, which has some really nice restrooms in it. Just about every government building in Minnesota has really nice restrooms because in Minnesota we have more standards and accountability over our politicians than, say, New York or California. Elections are a bit closer, so the government kind of needs to justify itself. But real ID should not be as difficult as it is, and enhanced ID should also not be that difficult either. Every DVS, which is what the official term for Minnesota DMVs is, every DVS should be able to give you an enhanced ID or a real ID, and they don't because they don't have the funding for that. But, the DVS, to its credit, lets you do things here, even before the pandemic, that other states don't. Like, in certain parts of Minnesota, you can schedule an appointment with the DVS in advance and just show up at a predetermined time to do what you need to do. You can fill out a form online, and you don't need to do that then and there at the DVS office, which is really neat. And why these, the poster child for government inefficiency, why in Minnesota they deserve a bit more than 1 star to their rating. Don't let that intimidate you. You still need to go to these buildings to do some very important things. And in Minnesota, they're done really well. In Missouri and Pennsylvania, which in Missouri, they're basically privatized, and in Pennsylvania, they're run really bad. No, those are really bad examples, and what not to do with your DMVs. And, in Minnesota, we call them DMVs here too, but if you say DVS, we still know what you're talking about. And the DVS is part of the DPS. It's a division of that. So that is my take on ID cards. Yes, I do think we should have a national one. They should be given out for free. We need a more secure number than Social Security. And those national ID cards should definitely be used to, states that have voter ID law should definitely be compelled to accept the federal national ID card. That should be an opt-in, not an opt-out. And, and our institutions need something better than a Social Security number. And if you want to buy an age-restricted item, have a form of ID with you at all times. Keep it in your wallet. Keep your wallet with you at all times. Do not leave it in your car. Stop leaving your payment method in the car. And, tap and pay is not universal. So, have your wallet with you. Have your payment cards with you. Have your ID cards with you. And, everywhere in the U.S., the acceptable forms are, and this is a descending order of validity, Passport, passport card, driver's license, state issued ID, those four every retailer will take. There's also military ID, which like 90% of retailers will take, and almost every state accepts. And then there's the tribal ID, which not every state accepts. And when I say passport and passport card, in every state, the domestic ones are valid, but the foreign ones vary from state to state. So that is my Minnesota perspective on ID cards and identifying people. No, I will not discuss Clear in this video. I might save that for a separate one. I think that's a pretty neat idea too, but definitely keep your ID cards with you at all times. And, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And if I, want to sell you cigarettes, you need the card. You need your valid ID cards.